Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with guest Carly Lucchesi, dietitian and inflammation coach. Hi, everyone. I am Lori Ann. I am the host of Bleep Bulimia, and I'm really thrilled to have Carly Lucchesi today here. She is a dietitian and an inflammation coach, which is really interesting. I want to know more about that. And she is with Your Living Health, and we're going to learn more about why Carly decided to get into this. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Hi, Lorianne. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So that is my first question. So what inspired you to get to become a dietitian?
I think there's a big difference between becoming a dietitian and then really finding the specialty that I wanted to target. So, when becoming a dietitian, it's kind of just that simple step of wanting to become healthy and really wanting to dig in and understand, what's going on internally that can create that health long term. So there was school, which, school checks some boxes and does all the things, but ultimately, it hasn't been where I've found the most education. That always comes from my clients and from really doing the work to figure out and how to solve for the pain, right? So what really drove me into the specialty of inflammation was just lost with GI conditions and the pain that GI conditions were causing. And what it led to was this pursuit of kind of more of that upstream cause of the GI discomfort and GI pain. And it led me to the story of inflammation, which is fascinating because that story has led me to working with clients with eating disorders, with not even just eating disorders, but maybe even a hard time gaining weight too. And, resolving your gut disorders, whether it be Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, it can be thyroid dysfunction. Inflammation is kind of this core dysfunction that I want really to empower each of you to understand that most of inflammation is within your control. It is a diet fix, it's a lifestyle fix, it's a brain fix. And once you kind of can surround those different areas, the impact on your life is just profound. So that's kind of, I guess, the nuts and bolts of why I really landed on being an inflammation coach.
Can you explain the GI?
So GI conditions, this one, so that's gastrointestinal, I guess, complications, discomfort, right? It can be, anywhere from diverticulitis, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, celiac disease, like anything where you're having that GI inflammatory component. So when you kind of get more into the upper, like ulcerative colitis, those type of GI conditions, you're more into that autoimmune type realm where your body has been so inflamed for so long that now your immune system is targeting itself, its own cells. So because it's just been so pissed for so long, it is like, okay, I need to just attack something. So then it starts to attack your own body. And then when it comes to autoimmune conditions, that's when, they come in clumps, right? When you have one, you're probably going to have two, you're probably going to have three, and then, your thyroid's going to start to get targeted in addition to your bowels, and then your, skin conditions can begin to develop, and it's kind of like then you're off to the races. But ultimately, we need to figure out, number one, what pissed off your immune system in the first place, and number two, how you can then understand and know the skills to reduce the amount of flares in the future.
That's really interesting. My mother has diverticulitis
Mm-hmm.
and and then she also has thyroid and now she has inflammation of her legs.
Yep.
Um, and she knows that part of it is her diet. But she says at 88 years old, she's going to have the thing she likes because she says, I'm not,
Right.
I'm not going to stop myself. But then, of course, she ends up in pain,
Right.
right?
And
So,
yep.
and I look at her, well, like, is it worth it, Mom? Like, but yeah, diverticulitis is and I know I'm saying my mother is 88, but she had it in her 50s, and I have a friend in her 30s. So it's not something that's age
Mm-mm.
specific.
not at all.
which is really interesting. Now, to speaking of eating disorders, so I mean, I was bulimic for 30 years, and I know I struggled um with GI. I had gosh, what was it called now? My stomach would bloat, and I could barely eat anything at sometimes, and it felt like even if I ate a cracker, it was like I ate a full meal.
Mhm.
Um, and I sometimes wondered, I would think that obviously, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but I would think bulimia would cause some of that inflammation, would be one of the reasons why, like, my bowels weren't happy, obviously, because I'm now, when I was bulimic, I was throwing up. I mean, what there's the bile, there's all that stuff that's necessary to, right, to digest
Mhm.
food, and we're not letting our bodies do it properly when we're bulimic. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
So this this is going to be kind of a longer-winded answer because this is you're absolutely nailing it that bulimia can trigger inflammation, but you're triggering it from multiple sources. So there's going to be the top down reaction and the bottom up reaction. So the bottom up reaction from bulimia kind of stems from more of that physical thing that's happening where you're stripping your body of the necessary stomach acids. You're creating more of that like tangible inflammatory response from a system that's being provoked time and time again that isn't necessarily meant to be provoked time and time again, right? So, the stomach acid component in itself might be creating what you probably experienced is SIBO, which is that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And what can cause that is delayed intestinal motility. So the acid in your stomach, once it hits your intestines, it creates what's called peristalsis. So that's the, it's this like rhythmic flexing of your intestinal muscles to get the food to move through. Well, when you don't have that hit of stomach acid, or food in that matter, what's going to happen is your intestines aren't going to move. And your gut bacteria that typically reside in your colon begin to get hungry, right? And then they start to migrate upwards. And then they start to find food because there's food within more of that upper area of your intestine that isn't digested yet. And then it creates, I mean, number one, it's happy bacteria, unfortunately, because they're finding food, but that's what creates bloat. And then the gases that those bacteria create actually creates even more lack of motility. So once you kind of have that bacterial overgrowth in locations that you don't want them to overgrow in, that's when you start to have a lot of these GI conditions. It can be bloat, it can be, constipation is a huge one. It could be, cramping, that sharp pain. It can be kind of a dull ache. It could be all of these different daily discomforts that can be created from that bacterial overgrowth. But that's just part of the physical reaction that can happen. But then we want to target the other thing that was provoking that inflammatory response. So obviously the bottom up, that's going to give you a pretty big inflammatory response when you have these bacterial overgrowth and you have just this dysbiosis going on. But then what's even provoking it more is the top down inflammatory response. So that is the way that your brain is perceiving your life's circumstances and what's kind of going on in the world around you. So this can create just as much inflammation as that whole complex from that bottom up reaction. So your brain is very much in control of your body. And that's when you're targeting inflammation. If you don't target both sides of the coin, you're going to miss the whole thing. Because if you just target the dysbiosis, but you don't learn how to manage your mind around life's circumstances, you're going to be creating the exact same inflammation anyway. So it's going to be missed. You're going to be falsely demonizing food. You're going to be falsely taking supplements that you think help you, when really the thing that might change everything for you is learning how to consciously manage your mind and consciously think through unique situations. And from working with clients with bulimia in the past, one of the things that shifted everything is just beginning to understand how to begin to listen to your thoughts so that you begin to fix that internal environment and begin to neutralize the external. Because a lot of times, so what I mean by that is a lot of times we try to take the external things in order to fix the internal, right? And with purging and with all that stuff, that is, you're trying to manipulate your external circumstances so that you can feel an emotion, right? Whether it be control, whether it be, relief, whether it be, name the emotion that you're seeking, you're trying to create it from external means. But what I challenge you to consider is that the thing that fixes and can release you from that top-down inflammatory response is beginning to know how to listen to your thoughts, to consciously manage your brain, consciously choose your thoughts on purpose so that you can calm that dysregulated nervous system that's creating that inflammatory response in the first place.
That's really interesting. Very, very interesting. And I do know, because I mean, I remember as a bulimic, believe it or not, like you're talking about emotions, and you're right, you'd go to it. So like if I was angry, I would get crunchy stuff. Like, it was and it was
Yeah.
related. If I needed comfort, it would be like soups and stuff my mom made, or and I could see that there was a relationship with what I chose to what my emotions were. And you're right, once you connect with your emotions and you connect with your brain, you don't get that feeling. You don't even connect food that way anymore, which is interesting.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Well, because that's really the challenge of it is beginning to understand how to find that space where the external things in life are neutral, where food is not responsible for creating an emotion, where your husband is not responsible for creating an emotion, your job, like all of these pressures in life that kind of like come at us. When we begin to understand that those are neutral and our thoughts about those things are what create our emotions and kind of our understanding of those things. That's when all of a sudden you step into your agency, your power over your life. And then you can start to again find joy in food because not because you need it, not because you're depending on that food to provide you the joy. It's more simply stepping into just the simple thought of, I enjoy this food, right? This is yummy, and I can have this when I want, and I can have this, or I can stop having it when I don't, but it's not responsible for the joy that I'm feeling. I am, right? And a lot of that is a slow process because we're really taught in our upbringing that external things cause our feelings, right? Like, when Timmy smacks you in the face in the playground, did Timmy hurt your feelings? It's like, well, no, Timmy didn't hurt my feelings. He hurt my face. And then I chose to be offended that he hit me, right? So it's starting to kind of separate out that world of external things causing your internal feelings.
that's a tough one, though. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is tough to get to that. I mean, because you do get affected by people, what they say to you, if they degrade you. I mean, it's hard to get to that position. I mean, I've had to work really hard at that because everyone wants to be accepted. And there's this thing about the bulimics, they're people pleasers and they want to be liked by everyone. I wouldn't say that is 100. It's a generalization. Everything is a generalization on this earth. But
Right.
it was true for me. I didn't want people not to like me. I felt very awkward when people didn't like me. I've
Mhm.
gotten to the point where if I know someone doesn't like me, I don't include them in my world. And I include the people, as you said, I like the joy word, that give me joy.
Mhm.
And that's changed things around. But it really is hard to get to that neutral that you're talking about. So can you talk a little bit more about it? Do you have any particular ways that you do it? I mean, without giving all your secrets away, obviously, but
Well, no, but I'll give away all the secrets. Like that's what I'm here for, is to definitely help people to gain that authority over their life, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, even with your example, right, that you have friends in your life that you want to accept you, right? So then even in this simple circumstance that happens to us every single day, right? Because we're humans. We're not going to be able to escape our brain. So there's always going to be kind of that primal drive to be part of a tribe, be part of a group. There's the primal drive to seek pleasure, right? To avoid pain, to conserve energy. And I would argue that there's a primal drive to be right. We're always arguing about like being correct, being right, So
Yeah.
those are always going to be things that our brain is driving us towards. So then it's having that compassion with yourself that, like, oh, of course, of course, I want this person to accept me. I want to be a part of the tribe. And I'm okay with that, right? Because that's just because I have a human brain. Nothing has gone wrong. This isn't something I can control. This is just kind of that neutral baseline. Now, knowing this, then it's starting to find neutral. Okay, what did this person say, right? Was it, I don't like your hair? What was the thing, the comment that was said that you then decided to think about it? They don't like me. Because unless they specifically said, well, even that, let's say it is the radical situation where somebody looks you in the eye and says, I don't like you. Okay. That in itself did not create your feelings. That is a neutral comment. You then get to think about that comment, what you want. You could agree with them, like, oh, you could say, I'm not likable. You could think, I agree with them, and then your brain could find the evidence for how you agree with them. But I want to challenge you to consider that you could also think about that comment. She's crazy. I'm totally likable. She must be having an off day because I'm actually an amazing person. So even her words aren't something that you have to agree with. When many of us just do, we automatically adopt the thoughts of others. And then that's how that automatic adoption, that subconscious adoption of that thought, then creates that feeling of sadness, devastation, right? And now I'm not part of the tribe. Now I'm not likable. All of these very negative things. But when you see this neutral comment for what it is, I don't like you, you also have the option to choose, she's crazy, I'm totally likable. And do you feel the difference in the emotion that that creates? Right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're creating your emotion. You're no longer victim to their thoughts.
Yeah.
You get to create your own. And just that's very simple example. But that's kind of the skill that can be developed that can help to create the agency over your brain to calm that top down inflammatory response that a lot of us get stuck in, right? A dysregulated nervous system is a big deal in our society right now. And it creates a lot of these symptoms that are just really uncomfortable. And then it creates these emotional eating patterns. And then it creates, for some, it creates eating disorders. For some, it creates just weight gain in general.
Yeah.
And and then you start to have the bottom up inflammatory response because now your body's stressed because of all this excess body weight. And you see how it's kind of that domino effect. But even the simple, even if you don't like your mom, right? If she doesn't want to control her food or change things that way, perfect. No problem. But the thing that can equally change everything is she willing to manage her mind? Is she willing to decide to think consciously or even to inspect the thoughts that she is subconsciously believing so that she can then just simply be witness to her brain as it thinks? Kind of a long-winded answer, but
No, that's beautiful. Actually, it has been tough on my mom too, because my dad passed away a year ago when they were married 65 years. So
yeah.
those are, she always liked certain things. She's always, but lately it's just more of a, yeah, it's like a treat, like the mindset. But to change that would be very difficult at this time. Um, but I like the listeners have every, like, that's a good thing to note. I found I've been told by people literally straight out, I don't like you. And it at a younger age, that would have really affected me. And I would have worked really hard to try and get them to like me. Now I realize like everybody's got their opinion and not everyone's going to like me. And that's okay. Right. But that's a hard place to get to. It took me quite a while to get there. But with help, you can get there faster. See, I didn't seek the help to get to that position of saying, that person doesn't like me. That's fine. I don't dislike them, but it doesn't mean that that they have to like me. It's, but yeah.
Well,
And
and even that's like so the challenge then is because you have the current thought that many of you believe is I'm not likable, right? And you're saying this distant island that you now finally believe is that some people aren't going to like me and that's okay.
yeah,
But that your brain, a lot of people's brains are not going to adopt that thought as fact. And that's where positive affirmations can do us a total disservice. Because essentially, if somebody just repeats, some people aren't going to like me and that's okay. Some people are, they're just lying to themselves. It's not something that your brain believes and it never will. It's too big of a jump, right? So that's why affirmations aren't the thing that's going to serve you. You've got to find neutral first.
interesting.
Something like a step in the right direction that's a little bit softer than I'm not likable is right now, I'm not likable, and that's okay, right? Just a shift in that right direction. This person doesn't like me right now, and that's okay, right?
Yeah,
And it's just helping your brain to adopt a simple thought that you actually believe that's a little bit less devastating than I'm not likable. And then you start to kind of ladder yourself towards that distant island that you finally arrived at, which is some people aren't going to like me, and that's okay. Right? I'm totally likable.
yeah. And I
That,
am, and I know
yeah,
that.
yeah. But and that's a beautiful space to finally be. But a lot of people get stuck in that void, that abyss, and they're like, "Well, I don't want to believe this. I'm stuck in this, but I can't believe this, and I don't know how to get there." One thought at a time. But you've got to be willing to be listening to the thoughts that you currently believe, so that you can begin to hear them consciously and begin to redirect your brain in a different direction. That's when you've entered that space of conscious thinking.
Yeah. That's interesting too when you say about not likable. And that's where a relationship with food can come in too, because food doesn't, it doesn't judge you or anything, and it's enjoyable in the wrong way. When you're a
Mm-hmm.
bulimic, it is enjoyable the right way when you're recovered, but it's a comfort thing. And I remember thinking, bulimia was a friend of mine because no one could tell that I had the food and that I could get. Then I realized, I don't need that friend anymore. And it was a weird way of looking at it, saying, you know what? Um, you were there when I needed you, but I don't need you anymore. And it's like you have to sever ties sometimes with friends if they're not healthy in your life, or relationships that they're not healthy. And I literally saw bulimia as a relationship of mine that was 30 years that I had to ultimately, I don't like the word divorce, but I had to separate myself from it. And it was like that island thing again, right? I love
Mm-hmm.
that. But it was just an interesting thing that unlikable thing, that food kind of blurred it, right? It just like made
Yeah,
it
it's
not go
creating.
away, but at that moment you're not, it's gone. Yeah.
Well, because even when you're currently believing the thought, I'm not likable, all food is doing is helping you to believe the thought that maybe this isn't that bad. This is yummy. And those are the thoughts that can create happiness, right? As you eat food, like somebody can eat a cookie and be like, this is freaking delicious, right? Now you have the emotion of ecstasy or the emotion of joy or whatever positive emotion, which softens the blow of I'm not likable,
Yeah.
right? But I challenge you to consider that like somebody could eat a cookie and be like, this is disgusting. This isn't worth it. Same cookie doesn't create the emotion. It's the thought about the cookie, right? So you can see how like that's where the emotional eating patterns can you can get stuck in because yeah, it creates dopamine, like the motivation to have the cookie, the excitement, the enjoyment, like it's the best thing ever. I get to look forward to it all day, right?
Yeah.
But which feels amazing and it gets you in that space of comfortable emotion. But ultimately, it's indulgent emotions that you're beginning to spin in because those indulgent emotions ultimately aren't driving you towards a future that you want. They're driving you away, right? So then it's beginning to gain authority over, oh, I'm creating these emotions, not the cookie.
Yeah.
And how can I then create emotions on purpose that are actually going to serve me, that are going to get me out of the devastation of I'm not likable
Yeah.
on purpose, right?
I like that, creating emotions on purpose. I think that that was a big thing that when I recovered, that was one of the hardest things to get through because you're not going to your food, you're not going, and then you are aware of your emotions a lot more because you're not
Yeah.
masking them. And the first 3 months to 6 months, I think, were the toughest part of that is dealing with those emotions. And, I'm not emotional. All of a sudden you are, and you're going,
Yeah.
whoa. Um, but so that's a really interesting thing, and that you can help guide people to do that, I think is just absolutely fantastic. Really
Well, whether
fantastic.
it be bulimia or difficult weight loss, it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just entering into a life where you're willing to feel your emotions on purpose.
Yeah.
Whatever the
Yeah.
emotion does not matter. Some are a little bit more uncomfortable than others. Shame is pretty brutal. Shame's a bad one.
It is.
But, defeat, courage, excitement, they're just vibrations in our body. They're just literally a chemical cascade that is created when we believed our thought that then washes over our body, right? So the emotion isn't something to be scared of or to run away from, to indulge in, when you can kind of almost separate yourself and turn into almost like a watcher of your body as it experiences that emotion. That's when you can start to feel your feelings on purpose. And once you enter into the space where you're willing to feel any emotion on purpose, all of a sudden things become a lot less intimidating, right? If you're willing to feel embarrassment on purpose and be like, oh no, I've got embarrassment. Like it's not fun. I don't enjoy it, but I can totally do it and not indulge in it. All of a sudden, like public speaking becomes available to you.
Mhm.
Something that's simple as that. Or maybe going up and talking to this person that you've never talked to before, trying to create that tribe. If you're willing to feel embarrassment on purpose, all of a sudden it's like, oh, now that's available to me. But when you're constantly running away from these emotions, now that conversation isn't even an option for you because you're not willing to feel embarrassed. But like, even that is just a beautiful step, recognizing what emotion am I running away from? And
Yeah.
am I willing to step into it, breathe into it, and just be curious what effect it has on my body and start to describe it, right? Like embarrassment feels like my skin gets a little tingly, my neck feels a little hot. My brain becomes a little foggy. I just can't find words. Like what happens? So that way, when you're in it, you can just watch your body experience it and it just calms that effect of it. But yeah, the skill of feeling your feelings on purpose, game changer with, I would say, life in general, not just
I was,
bulimia, not
I
just
was gonna,
difficult weight loss.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say that because even it was funny because they both start with the BUL, but bullies, like being bullied, uh, and you're talking about that embarrassment. Bullies will embarrass the person who's being bullied. Um, and it it's interesting if you do take that logic and don't take it as, and obviously to me bullies have issues themselves. They're not happy if they have to
Oh,
beat up on somebody else, and if you look at it that way and change it, it's, but again, like you were saying, feeling your emotions on purpose and not taking their emotions too personally. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so yeah, I was just thinking
neutralizing.
of that. It
Yeah.
was, yeah,
I was just going to say with bullies, again, it's always just neutralizing. There's the
yeah,
actions that they do to you, and
yeah,
then there's your perception of it. You
yeah,
can choose to be embarrassed, but they can't embarrass you.
yeah,
They just can do actions on you,
exactly.
essentially. And some of those actions maybe can create pain or whatever the thing, but like they can't create embarrassment. Only you
Yeah,
can, right?
I love it.
And, maybe you want to be embarrassed. Maybe that's what you choose to be on purpose. But yeah, the willingness to feel that anyway is a game changer.
I have a cute little story. So
Yeah.
at work, I eat really, really slowly. And it's just because I like to, and
Yeah.
I enjoy eating slowly. And a friend of mine at work, one of my colleagues, she says, "Oh my goodness." She goes, "I'm never going for lunch with you." She goes, "I'd be having dinner by the time you're done." Now, there would have been a time I would have been embarrassed about someone saying something like that or
Yeah.
picking on me for eating so slowly. And I just play back with her. I go, "Yeah, you're right." I mean, just accepting that, I could have taken that as an insult, and I took it as a joke. And so I joke about it all the time with her. We joke around all the time. That's like our thing. It's like we order pizza at work. "Oh yeah, Lorianne, like we're gonna finish the whole pizza before you finish your half." Like, and it's like a thing. That's who I am. And I've grounded
Right.
myself with that, and I'm okay with it. Right. So
Yeah.
I think it's funny. But like I said, 30 years ago, I probably wouldn't have. I would have probably started eating faster just to make sure that I was, part of the team, or like you said, the tribe, like trying to be like them. Being an individual is amazing, and
Mhm.
accepting that you're different from them and that they're gonna finish the whole pizza when you're still only halfway through yours. So what? Right? Like, you don't
Mhm.
have to be them. Yeah.
No. Yeah, 30 years ago, you would have indulged in the thought
Yeah.
they're picking on me.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being conscious to that thought, they're picking on me, is a beautiful space to be in because before you wouldn't have even seen it. You just would have been spinning in it, right?
Yeah.
And then trying to fix that thought with food. I better eat
Yeah.
faster, right? Like that
Yeah.
thought will go away. But you could eat the pizza within a minute and still be indulging in the thought they're picking on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
it
it's not
just,
doing me, it's not
no,
doing me any service, right? And that's the big thing
no,
too, what you're saying. When you are feeling emotions on purpose, I love that. I still love that. I definitely wrote that down because I think it's great. But make sure that those feelings will serve you, right? Like
right.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And the thought that you're now choosing to adopt about the pizza of I eat slowly because I want to, or I eat slowly and that's okay. That's who I am now. That's a thought that you could have even created 30 years ago. You just wouldn't have believed it yet,
that's true.
right?
That's neat.
Yeah. And it's fun to even enter into that world of just being a watcher of your brain. And we're just such a unique creature in this world that's able to use our brains to inspect our brains.
True.
And I would say that that maybe is step one for your listeners, and something they can really do today is get pen on paper and just write out your thoughts. And that's how you can be witness to your brain. You can't be witness to your brain like where you're just letting thoughts spin around. You really need to just get them on paper so that your eyeballs can be witness to them. And that's going to create that step where you're beginning to create space between the thoughts that you're thinking and the thoughts that you want to think on purpose. Because, like, when you get them all out on a piece of paper in front of you, it's called a brain dump. So, when you get them all out on a piece of paper in front of you, you can begin to see some thought errors, right? Just where you look at it and you're like, oh my God, that's not even true. So that way, when you hear it again in the future, you're like, you can almost flick it away because you're like, I've already identified that that's a total BS thought. And then you can start to see the things that you believe that aren't serving you. And that's when you can maybe begin to start to consciously replace those with little shifts in the right direction. Or you can just completely like put thoughts in the background, thoughts that maybe from your childhood that maybe your parents kind of gave you, because when you're a kid, you kind of just adopt thoughts subconsciously. Maybe you have some of those subconscious thoughts back there in the background that you're believing currently that are probably never going to go away, right? Thoughts that create anxiety, some of those just never really go away. But then it's learning how to begin to see those thoughts because you've been witness to them with your eyeballs. You can start to almost put them like in the back seat, like a news ticker where they just kind of like flicker by, but you just don't believe them. You're like, oh, there's that thought. Like, I know it's not going anywhere, but it's not a big deal. I don't believe it. It's just there. And it just can help to kind of calm that environment. But that's step one is you've got to be witness to your brain. And to do that, like pen to paper.
I love it. Witness to your brain. I really, really appreciate you being here. This was really, really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It really opened my eyes to a few things. I guess part of it too is I'm thinking, wow, I should be proud of myself because there's things that you're saying there that I didn't realize that I've achieved.
Yeah.
So
You've
that's
done a lot of work.
yeah. So I really appreciate it. Where can my listeners get in touch with you, Carly?
So my website, yourlivinghealth.com, there's a link to my podcast too that goes over a lot of this conscious agency over your brain and kind of steps for how to do that. You can, book a consult with me and we can chat about your unique situation, my email address, and then again, Instagram, Facebook handles are Your Living Health.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.